Hello, and a very good morning to everyone. Thank you for joining us today for the Reduce Rejection Writing for the High Publication Impact in Social Sciences. And we have our beloved Dr. Amrita from School of Education and Modern Languages with us today. So, for the information of all audiences, Dr. Amrita holds a PhD in educational psychology and she has 23 years of experience in the field of education in 3 different countries. 7 years of these are teaching and researching experience in educational and developmental psychology at tertiary level in Malaysia. And in a short span of her career in higher education, she has published more than 30 articles, most of which are indexed in WOS and Scopus database. She serves as a section editor for the International Journal of Student as Partners IJSAP and an editor for Scopus Index Malaysian Journal of Learning and Instruction MJLI. So we welcome Dr. Amrita here, and with this, I pass the workshop to Dr. Amrita. Well, Dr. Amrita, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Okay, before I begin, can I share my slides?
Yes, Dr. Please.
All right. So, very good morning to everyone. Everybody joining from different parts of the world is something that's exciting. I would also like to thank RIMC, UUM, and I can see the director, Prof. Azia, and the deputy director, Prof. Nasrun, is present here, which is extremely encouraging for everybody involved in UUM. This is what shows the dedication UUM has for research and publication. So a special thanks to RIMC for providing this opportunity. Okay, now because I'm on full screen, I can see, and I might be able to see if you have any questions. So I assume that we will have a question and answer session before I finish. But in case you have any questions, feel free to ask, unmute yourself and ask your questions. Okay, you can see the title on the screen. But before I begin, I've got 2 disclaimers, which is everybody must understand, because I know there are people listening to this workshop outside of UUM as well. So what I would like to highlight is the talk is situated in our context. When I say our context is UUM and in Malaysian context. I have worked with PhD students and also have participated in number of peer reviews and have worked with my young early researchers, my colleagues. So there are certain things which I would like to highlight specifically for them, which is one of which is peer review. How much people are scared of receiving peer reviews is one thing, and this the topics that I'm going to focus are very much situated in our context, but I'm sure they're going to be useful for others listening to this talk. And the second important thing is I really hope that people do not assume that when you listen to such workshops or talks, and then you will apply these tips in a prescriptive way, and that will promise you a successful publication. Please keep in mind, a prerequisite for a successful publication in a reputed journal is a quality manuscript, a quality conceptualization, and a robust methodology. I'm not going to be talking about what a quality conceptualization comprises, or I'm not also going to talk too much about methodology. I'm going to talk about arguing writing in an argumentative way. So keep one thing that I'm assuming that everybody who wishes to apply the things that I'm going to share today applies to a manuscript which is well conceptualized and has a robust methodology. All right. I will, okay, just move to the next slide, which is about the structures of today's talk. Uh, okay, as I said, the talk is situated in Malaysian context. It means I have attended several talks, and all my colleagues, early researchers and students, they attend several talks organized frequently by different universities. There is very less focus uh, on telling students uh, what constitutes writing for social sciences. When we listen to people from pure sciences, from engineering, from medicine, I think we get a very different perspective, uh, which does not apply to writing for social sciences, not in all areas, but in one area, which is something I'll be discussing today. And in the second part, I'll be focusing on three things which are focused on valuing peer review, for choosing a right journal, and avoiding desk rejection. Why are we going to be talking about avoiding desk rejection? Means peer review is valuable, and we should not fear, but we should welcome peer review. In the final part of the talk, we will be talking about uh, five important points that constitute a winning review, like the things that you will have to be focusing. Uh, the two things I repeat again, which I'm going to focus, is writing in social sciences, how different it is than writing for pure sciences. Uh, that is the focus. Okay, I'm getting somebody's request. Uh, okay, I approve. All right. Um, and then the second focus would be not avoiding peer review. So I think I'll go ahead. Okay, I'm a bit stuck. Give me a moment. Okay, writing for soft sciences. Quickly, let's have a look at this quote from Albert Einstein. Uh, he said, understanding physics is child's play compared to understanding child's play. I really have a student, and I'm not sure if she's attending, but she is doing her project work with Dr. Sarima. She is studying a child's play, kindergarten students' play. You can imagine a scientist of Einstein's repertoire having to say that studying human behavior is more challenging than studying physics. And authors writing for social sciences have to take this statement with all sincerity, understand the challenges of studying human behavior. Studying may not be that challenging as compared to communicating your study of human behavior, because human behaviors are extremely complex and they are unpredictable. There are multitudes of factors that can affect human behaviors. There is not one answer to our investigations. It is very difficult when you write a manuscript based on social sciences or studying any kind of human behavior. It is difficult to conclude what you have discovered in your investigation as compared to people reporting their findings from sciences. All right. Uh, this is what soft sciences looks like. Uh, I think you can look at the pictures. There are different genders, there are different age groups, there are different races. Perhaps these people come from different backgrounds. These people have their own bias, own prejudice. They bring a lot of experiences with them. So the biggest challenge for writing in social sciences is subjectivity. You are going to write one manuscript, which is going to go through one or two editors, and then you will have at least 3 to 4 reviewers. I'm talking about high impact indexed or predominantly WOS journals, which will give you at least 4 peer reviews. You can imagine those people bringing in a lot of baggage with them while they look at your manuscript. Social sciences, the kind of investigation we undertake, mainly constitutes human behaviors. And as I said, human behaviors are unpredictable, complex. Even human behaviors are developmental in nature. You want to study students' motivation, you collect data in the morning, your findings are going to be different from if you collect data late in the evening, because our behaviors are developmental, and as I said, they are influenced by multitudes of factors in our environment, in our personality, individual differences. So when you are writing a manuscript, you have to keep in mind the person who reads it has some different experience than yours. So a peer review of a social sciences manuscript faces all those challenges because we don't give one correct answers. The third thing is the answers that we report in our findings, not necessarily, uh, because everything is so subjective in social sciences, it is not necessarily that our answers would match to any scientific laws or any predictions. So what becomes very important writing for social sciences is precision of our language, the way we write. And I think this is what is the focus of my today's sharing session. I know writing is discomforting, writing is extremely unpleasant sometimes. So when people begin to write, they just want to get over the manuscript as soon as possible. And my focus here, and it's a request, it is a, I mean, it is just my personal reflection that in social sciences, if you are looking for success, and our success is getting published in high impact in reputed journals, it would require precision of language. I am not talking about English language proficiency. I am talking about the way you put forward your argument. Why am I saying that? Because we are in a mucky play. We are amongst in so many challenging uh, situations. Subjectives, no right and wrong answers. We do not have established laws and principles. So let's have a look at what hard sciences looks like. I hope the picture conveys a lot of things about hard sciences. Uh, Everybody is working on the single problem. And here also you can see people of different colors. But it is highly likely in hard sciences that there is one answer to a problem, or maybe maximum 2 answers to a problem. There is no subjectivity. There is absence of any kind of prejudice, any kind of emotions. Let's say the guy is looking at something turning into red in the picture. Red remains red any time of the day. Red remains red for any age group. Red remains red for no matter where you come from. So judging a quality of your finding or your the results of your investigation in hard sciences is not as difficult as it is in social sciences. The literature review that you present in hard sciences are usually based on scientific laws. But in social sciences, we do have principles and theories, but because of given subjectivity, because of given prejudice, personal bias, personal experiences, they can always be questioned. I can just give you a quick example of one manuscript we have been currently working. We have revised and submit to WS, and I think it's 2 point something impact factor. It's a reputed journal. One of the reviewers have argued the way we have conceptualized well-being. And to my surprise, I mean, being from psychology, I study well-being quite often. And it was a surprise for me to hear from the reviewer that there is another perspective of looking at well-being. The reviewer did not agree with my conceptualization of well-being. So of course, while revising, I had to write almost 1.5 page to convince the reviewer of my stand of considering that my perspective of well-being. So these are certain things which fortunately people in hard sciences do not have to struggle with. Therefore, the precision of language, the degree of persuasion is moderate in hard sciences. So, I mean, I had discussed it with Prof. Rosna, and she was the one who recommended that we talk about writing for social sciences. When young researchers or PhD students attend these talks where you are given stepwise tips to write for index journal, people forget to highlight the relevance, the importance of argumentative writing, which is the soul of writing success in social sciences. Nobody talks about persuasion and argumentation while people talk about publishing in high impact journals. And students come back thinking that as long as their introduction, method, results are in place, it is a recipe for a successful publication in social sciences. I would say the answer is no. My personal experience of publishing is I have had wonderful conceptualization. Excellent um, I have had excellent methodologies. Despite all of this, I have rejections. And it is wonderful to hear from peer reviews the way they say. You know, sometimes the rejection comes out, and it's a very common Western phrase. You have not teased out the issue. The word teasing out, you know, that is what constitutes an argumentative and a persuasive writing, which is the soul of a writing for social sciences, and which we very often overlook, and which is the focus of my talk today. All right, so okay, soft sciences looks like too hard to write. There is a guy called Becker's. This is an online blog where I got these. He proposes 5 reasons why writing for social sciences is challenging. So basically, I'm summing up what I've been talking about in last few slides. There are no laws while we write for social sciences. All we have is probabilities. There is no definite prediction. I mean, if if I have hypothesized that working hard will ensure success in my exam, and a reviewer might argue that no, exam performance is contingent upon several factors. It could be a student's IQ, it could be students' the degree of preparation. So basically the point is, when we are writing, you have to understand we are walking on a thin string, because there are so many explanations of against what you are writing. Another challenge of writing in social sciences is there are multiple experts involved, because one issue in social sciences can be viewed differently from different experts in different fields. I agree that when you submit your manuscript for a review, um, people in your the most likely people in your field would be reviewing your manuscript. But let's take an example of education psychology. I sometimes send my journals to purely education, my articles to purely educational journals. I might have people who come from educational technology background, and they've got better knowledge about uh, technology. But I am just presenting my paper from education perspective, but the reviewer can come from an additional expertise. So sometimes, sometimes your peer reviews really shake you when people ask you questions which are away from your field. There are educationalists and economics. So I am looking as a motivation expert. I would look issue of disengagement from my perspective, but somebody who is from economics or somebody from sociology would look at the same problem in a different perspective. So how do we balance those challenges constitutes our writing in social sciences? The third point Becker's highlight is zillions of variables. Yes, everything is connected in social sciences. If you talk about, I'll always stick to the example of student disengagement is the most easy one and everybody can relate. You talk about student disengagement, you have planned to talk about two variables in your study. You have to ensure that you nullify the other variables so that so that reviewers, if they question why not those variables. So social sciences is just like everything is connected. There are multitudes of factors, as I said, and there can be multiple potential causes for creating something. So it's called a bowl of spaghetti with a lot of things inside it. It is your job, which is extremely challenging, to put forward your point that what you are prescribing is important. There are many levels of actions. What does it mean in social sciences? We look at the problems at local level, at national level, at international level, at organizational levels, at network level. This doesn't happen in hard sciences. That is why writing for hard sciences, perhaps their introduction and the argument section might be like sometimes 2 paragraphs or maybe 3 paragraphs. The whole manuscript is 7 pages. On the other hand, while we are writing for social sciences, our manuscripts can go more than 20-25 pages. I mean, minimum of 7,000 words, because we are busy struggling with these 5 factors. The last most challenging one is imprecise measurements. I'm not sure if I should be calling them imprecise because I trust my measurements are valid and reliable, but our measurements are always questionable. I mean, recently I was asked, why did I change a Likert scale from 1 to 5? I mean, originally it was 1 to 7 and I changed it to 1 to 5. We have issues with our measurements. Any social scientist can question the validity or the reliability of our instruments. How do we pass off? This is what becomes, this is what makes writing for social sciences challenging. Okay, the I've given you, when you get the slides, you can all go through the references that I provide. Another biggest challenge of a successful publication in social sciences is acceptance rate. This is also coming from a certain reference, but it is well known among social scientists who aim to publish in high impact journals that the acceptance rate can be as low as 5%. I've given you an example of Harvard Educational Review. The highest could be 20. I have not come across yet even 25. So if you would go into education or education psychology or higher education journals like teaching in higher education, studies in higher education, active learning in higher education, innovation in higher education, most of these journals have 20%, maximum of 20% acceptance rate. What does that tell? It tells us we need to be extremely competitive in our writing if we aim to publish in those high impact journals. Okay. Another thing, again, this is to best of my knowledge. If anybody can find a higher H index, I'll be happier. Journals in education and in social sciences, psychology, most education technology are the maximum that I've found is 8 H index. And I was thinking early this morning discussing with Noman. What does it tell? That I mean, if you see in hard sciences, the H index can go up to 30, up to more than 30 sometimes. Why is it 8? Because it tells us that not many people are perhaps publishing in WOS. Not many social scientists are publishing in World of Science or in high impact journals. Perhaps that is one explanation. There might be others, and I'll be happy to hear if somebody shares that their experience. So basically, I was just setting a background for everybody who aims to publish in reputed journals, in high impact journals, in higher education, have to understand the the severity, the challenges of writing for these kinds of journals. Uh, yeah, this is a link here, and anybody interested later on can go on to this link. So now we know I've been talking about the challenges of subjectivity, the challenges of personal biases, multiple variables, and how challenging it could be writing for social sciences to get into reputed journals. So despite the challenges of subjectivities, how do we articulate our writing in an objective way that we can pass it off as scientific knowledge? Like all the points that I've been discussing, it tells that we are unable to come up with a scientific solution because there are so many perspectives. But no, the fact that there are scientific journals in social sciences means that we all can overcome those challenges of subjectivities. How do we overcome the challenges of subjectivities in social sciences? For me, what I have discovered in last 6 years is to be able to write argumentatively, to be able to write persuasively. There can be multiple solutions to the problem that I'm reporting in my article, but if I write that in a persuasive manner, in an argumentative manner, I think we can be successful, and we can increase our publication chances to publish in those journals. One thing that I am going to repeat to all my colleagues who are early career researchers and to all my PhD students, there is no shortcut for you to get into high impact publications in social sciences. Please forget about the notion that it can be prescriptive. You are just going to write introduction, method, and discussion, and then you are done. It is not. It is almost like I'm sure when we were in school, we read about what's the difference between facts and opinions. So I feel that we are all dealing with opinions, and we have to pass off our opinions as facts in social sciences to be able to convince our reviewers and to be able to get accepted in the paper. So please learn to write in an argumentative manner that you overcome the subjectivity and the challenges of writing in social sciences. I've not begun yet. I was just setting up the background. Are there any questions? I can see a lot of chats, but I know the chats are about people exchanging their contacts and all. If there is any question, feel free to unmute and ask. And if there is no question, I'm happy to move forward. So it might look like that I have discouraged everybody that social writing for social sciences and high impact journal is a challenge. But I show you a beautiful picture, a lively picture that is always a hope. And while I talk about hope, there's also a question that why did my title mention the word rejection? Why didn't I talk about how to get accepted? Because that's more positive, that's most encouraging. So why are we talking about rejections here? The answer is this. And I think most of you would agree. When you look at a published manuscript in a high impact journal, All we do is we just look at the manuscript. Wow, she got published or he got published, and how lucky is that? That's wonderful. We also say, wow, what a wonderful manuscript. I don't think I can write like this. What we fail to see is this. There is much more, a much larger part in the publication journey that is not seen or known to others, which is the tiresome journey uh, of getting through the peer reviews, getting through the rejections, revise and resubmit, multiple resubmits, yet not getting accepted. So these are these are uh, the factors that determine your successful publication, but not many of us are able to see that. And it is very important to acknowledge the importance of the hidden portion of this iceberg. Once we get prepared, once your manuscript is ready, and then do not hurry, do not aim to publish in 2 months. I know, I understand the challenges of PhD students. They have to finish. Most of them are working. They have to get back home. Of course, they do not want to go on paying the fee. I agree with that, but you can do that with one paper and get your viva done. But please do not get anxious into publishing and increasing. It's about the quantity, increasing the quantity and sending your papers left, right, center, thinking that you do not want to look at the peer reviews, or you don't want to entertain reviewers. Please, that is one thing which is like I'm literally requesting to at least to students, look at peer reviews from a positive perspective. So what, when you have an objective of publishing in a high impact or in a reputed journal in social sciences, your first step has to be, after you have written your manuscript, is target for avoiding desk rejection. I always tell my students that if your manuscript has passed on to reviewers, it is almost your 50% success. People don't understand the value that, wow, it has passed the desk, editor's desk, and it has been assigned for review. That's already a success, because the peer reviews, remember the iceberg. There is no guarantee that you send your paper to one journal and after one peer review it's going to be accepted. But that doesn't matter. Okay, there is a question coming. Maybe let me see. Okay, how do I take the question? Okay, give me a second. Okay, if I take, can I take maybe questions later on? Okay, I'll take the questions later on. I saw somebody's question has come up for peer review. Perhaps I'll stop and take all the questions, or somebody can help me put the questions together. So the central idea for students and for early career researchers is to look forward to not to get desk rejection, because once you're in I'm talking about reputed journals, if your manuscript has undergone has been sent for peer review, 50% of your job is done. The 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 quality journals employ reputed peer reviewers who are expert in your field, who are sincere about the jobs they do. They would sit down and they would look at each line of your manuscript. Can you imagine an expert going through your manuscript? I mean, I know one of my PhD student is here, Rahim. We had sent his PhD manuscript to a highly reputed journal in psychology, motivation and emotion. And the editor is John Marshall Reeve, and he's almost a god in our field. Rahim got his manuscript reviewed by John Marshall Reeve. He himself read his lines and he himself gave his feedback. Can you imagine the value of that manuscript? How many of you have this opportunity to engage those experts for our to review our manuscripts? So the idea here is, if you are targeting Q2 journals in WOS, begin with Q1 journals in WOS. I mean, I always tell this to everyone. Nobody is going to haunt you down and come to your house and say your manuscript was poor and how dare you submit your manuscript. No, make your manuscript good enough not to get avoided at the desk, and receive peer reviews. That is why I said this is one of the greatest tip I can give you to not to get rejected, not in the first journal. Once you have gotten your peer reviews and you have worked on your peer reviews, you would successfully be able to get your manuscript published in another journal. All right, so please make it a point. You have a notebook beside you, or you're taking a note. You make it a point. You will produce a manuscript that is good enough to go for a peer review in a Q1 WOS journal. You will not feel sad about it being rejected, but you have earned something, which is peer review. Okay, peer review is precious, extremely precious. And why is that so? Because this is something that I've written from my heart. We can go to universities to get qualifications. I mean, all PhD students go to universities to learn to become researchers. So we know how to conduct research. We know how to do literature review. We know how to apply robust methodologies. We can even go to workshops to learn certain skills, how to analyze the data, or we can learn uh, um, how to conduct a literature review. We can learn how to use a particular software. But learning to write for high impact journal, there is no other way than undergoing peer reviews, responding to the peer reviews, and improving on your manuscript. This is coming purely out of my own experience. There is nobody in this world who can teach you how to write than the reviewers. You know, I know some students and I also know some colleagues who can get upset by peer reviews. They get offended by peer reviews. And people would take peer reviews personally. It's like somebody called my manuscript lousy, or somebody called that my English is poor. And that affects people to an extent that their self-esteem is affected. Please do not do that. It is a process. Peer review is a process where they say author's work is subjected, the scholarly work is subjected to scrutiny by others who are expert in your field. And if people are not going to critique your work, it is never going to become a signature work. Your work is never going to be of high importance. So we need to develop a love for getting those critical peer reviews. And more, fine, maybe you can't get yourself, uh, you can't convince yourself to see peer reviews in positive lights, but understand the relevance of peer reviews. If they guide you to write argumentatively, the kind of questions they ask makes you think. And not only for the particular paper, once you have undergone a rigorous peer review process, you become an expert writer for your next manuscript. It is highly likely that you will not repeat those mistakes for other manuscripts. All right, so please develop a positive attitude. Seek, beg, welcome peer reviews. Do not run away from them. Look at this picture. Might look might look a bit funny, but this is how I see. This is what peer review does to your manuscript. See, it is a picture of a living room. And in both the pictures, before and after, the picture remains, the functional value of the picture remains the same. A living room continues to be a living room. But look at the aesthetics in terms of how pleasing it has become, how positive it has become. Look at the artful, the sense of art the room is reflecting after renovation. This is what peer review would do to your manuscript. This kind of the picture tells us that the significance, the relevance, the meaning of a living room is improved after renovation. So do not get offended when somebody says the color is too dark. Fine, there must be a way. An expert is telling me. Why don't I choose to go for a lighter color? This is a peer review is going to make your work look wonderful. It's going to make your work look outstanding. So what I have learned with peer review is we talk about reflection in our life. So when you're reflecting, you need questions to reflect. Reflection cannot be random. Reflection cannot be broad. So when your manuscripts undergoes through a peer review, the kind of questions reviewers ask sometimes, they make you think deeply about your work. They seek justification of why you have said and what you have said. And that is what, when you look at their questions, what does it mean? And you go back to your work and you look into it, oh yeah, I was missing that point. Oh yeah, I mean, it makes sense. So peer reviews provide us excellent guiding questions to reflect on our manuscript. Now, it's not that all the reviewers only ask questions or criticize your work, because in reputed journals, it is the expert who is looking at your manuscript, who is looking at the nitty-gritty of your manuscript, the kind of recommendations they make, that immensely helps you in improving your work. Just like this picture, your work becomes certainly bright and attractive and more meaningful because of the recommendations. They direct you to relevant literature, they direct you to relevant sources where you might have not known, because they are the experts. They've been in that area for much longer than you are. So uh, basically, summing up or concluding, my focus is welcome peer reviews. And how can you get peer reviews? By having a manuscript that is not rejected at the desk. Okay, I've been talking for a while and everybody's listening, and I'm not sure how intently people are listening. So I've got this question. If anybody would like to unmute their microphone and share, what was the longest peer review you have ever received? I'm sure there are a lot of people who have tried submitting their manuscripts to those uh, so-called reputed journals which give you critical overviews. What
Uh,
was the longest peer review? Yes, yes.
I think this is hello.
Yep, I can hear you.
Okay, this is Muslim Diakola Akamu from STML, PhD student.
Right. Yes,
Okay,
Muslim.
the longest peer review I received, I think it's around 1 year and 2 months from Inda Science.
Oh, I mean to say in terms of length of the peer review.
Yeah, it's around like they will correct, send it back, then I will send it back to them. They will correct
Okay,
again. I think
that's
around
wonderful.
1 year,
One
1 year
year.
and 2 months.
Yep. You are talking about the time
The
it is
period.
wonderful. This is
Yeah.
another information. I'm talking about. What the information you've given is wonderful. Yes, to be able to publish in high impact reputed journals, it might take sometimes 2 years. So I can see Dr. Manvinder has written 4 pages. I would agree. I'm not sure why Rahim is quiet. Rahim, uh, 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 our manuscript together with Prof. Rosna, we have received, I think, almost 18 pages long peer
Yeah,
review.
five reviewers together. Not
Five
only
reviewers. Here, Rahim
five
is
reviewers
talking. There are
together.
5 reviewers.
Plus
I
the
mean,
editor review.
and yes, and the editor. So 18 18 pages is when we keep no spaces in between, and our font is smaller. Perhaps if we go times Roman 12, sometimes the reviews are as long as your manuscript. Can you imagine? Our manuscripts are 20 pages long, and the review could be as long as your manuscript. What is our reaction when we look at those manuscripts? Yes, it is distressing. It is stressful. But please understand that this is one of the recipes to get into index journals. Yeah, and imagine for free somebody has sat down, and that's the beauty of academic integrity, that somebody, an expert, sits down, looks at your manuscript and provides you, bothers to write so many lines for your manuscript and provides you that wonderful peer review. So thank you for sharing. Yes, Dr. Vijay from Otago is writing that it might be distressing, but it has great value. And this is what we all have to learn, even early career researchers and PhD students, that it is a war field. You have to go there and face it. Do not feel disappointed or distressed. Okay, so now we understand the challenges of writing in social sciences. We also understand the value of peer review. So our objective now, the first before we begin, is to choose our journal. Okay, there's another question coming in for everybody. You can choose to write. I don't want to disturb the screen and open the chat, but I can see some of the chats on the top. But you can unmute your mic and tell me, when do you choose your journal for your article? Before you begin to write, or after you have finished writing, or during your writing? There has to be some answers. Before writing, that's wonderful. After writing, Dr. Manvinder.
Before writing.
Before writing, okay. I should have done a poll here and use education technology. Somebody is writing A, yes, wonderful, before. That's an excellent answer. I'm not saying that it is a bad practice that once you have finished writing and you look for journal, but yes, the best practice would be before writing. We'll talk about it. Why? And does it make difference to your publication success? I am not so sure, but it does make your publication process easier if you choose your journal before writing. So as you said, recommended practice is choose your journal early. It helps you in so many ways. The most important thing is the technical requirement of a journal, which is the formatting. Is it APO or APS or Chicago manual, or whichever the formatting style is. But the most important thing is scope of journal. And it might sound a bit boastful, but I really want to accept here, because I'm here to motivate everybody. Most of the time I would look at the journal and, like, I have that kind of aspiration that I want my paper to be in this journal. So there are times I have written for the journals. And I'm sure everybody must have experienced this or will experience later on in their career. Sometimes you are reading one journal quite often, and you develop certain kinds of affinity or respect, or a value for that particular journal, and the kind of articles, the journals indulge themselves into a line of dialogues. So what kind of articles this journal is publishing, who are the people who are publishing in this journal, how would you like to be a part of that dialogue? So sometimes it's a very spiritual sort of journey, that you keep looking at this journal and you keep looking at your favorite authors publishing there, and you would like to jump in, just like I'm giving you a talk and everybody is putting their views in the chat, because you want to be a part of this talk. You want to engage yourself. Similarly, once you become a profound writer, a very reflective author, you would have the journals and you will write for a particular journal. This is what happens. So that is what I mean with the scope of journal. Because you are so familiar with the journal, you know who are the audiences. Who are the audiences of the journal? Normally, the people who are publishing in it, the editors, the reviewers associated with that journal. Uh, I know who are the experts in my field, and I always see them in that journal. And somebody writes, and somebody sometimes rebuttals, and somebody sometimes supports somebody else's research. And there's sort of a conversation going on in this journal, and then you're so excited that I want to go and contribute. So I mean, I know it might sound a bit uh, impossible for people who are very new to publishing, but it will happen, and that is what we call scope of journal. So you must be you must look for a journal that matches what you are writing. And I'll quickly give you an example. I'm not sure if Dr. Fiza is here from communications. We wrote one paper on intercultural competence. You will not believe the way reviewers have written. Yes, Dr. Fiza is here, and she would know the reviewer. The reviewers had said, "Thank you very much for writing for intercultural competence. We really appreciate your effort." You know, there are not many people who are writing on intercultural competence. You know, it felt like we were obliging the journal by writing for them because the scope was just right, because we were writing for intercultural competencies, and the journal had great interest in intercultural competencies, and they were so thrilled to get our paper, and we got our paper published very easily within 6 months. So that's why scope of journal matters a lot. And then, okay, geographical coverage. It is something very interesting, and I have discovered it recently. You go to some of the journals, and I would specifically highlight higher education, Springer's, yes, Springer's journal, 2 point something or 3 point something impact factor, a very popular journal among all higher education experts. If you would go to the titles of that journal, I'll show you some of the titles later in the slides. There is a lot of emphasis on geographical location. So when you go and you look at those titles, then you realize that this journal is very interested in highlighting a particular information from a particular geographical location, because you would see in the titles the name of the countries. And being in Malaysia, where people who are not we are not publishing quite a lot in those journals. Editors always grab information coming from regions who are not publishing very frequently. So yes, leverage upon it, go and look in the journals. Are they highlighting geographical location, and how will your manuscript coming from a different perspective would add significance or value to that particular journal? Okay, now this is a tricky tip. Okay, I'm not sure how good is that tip, but I guess that's pure guess that it might work in some cases. Publication frequency. We have recently found out with my professor. We were looking at the journals, and we look at the publication frequency. The journals who publish very often has relatively lower rejection rate. So when you are getting started, or you want a motivational boost to yourself, perhaps you can look for journals who publish frequently, not 4 times a year. The journals with 4 times a year are sometimes less than 5% have less than 5% acceptance rate. So publication frequency can be associated with rejection rates. All right, this is last tip for choosing a journal, and this tip works in multiple ways. It is about backup journals. Everybody who has published with me, they would see that on top of my abstract before I submit, I always have at least 4 journals in order, in priority order, lined up. So for example, my manuscript is going to be submitted to higher education, and if it gets rejected, I have my plan B, a backup plan. It would go to active learning in higher education. If it is rejected there, it would go to studies in higher education, for example. Now, when do you do that? Because it's a funny analogy that I use, but I think it is an appropriate analogy that your publication, your manuscript is like an investment. You know, the people from business here, sitting here, or anybody who's business minded would agree, you do not want to be sitting on your money. You would always want it to be invested in the market. As an author, I see a finished manuscript as an investment. It should always be in the market. Means once a manuscript comes back, it is rejected. I would leave any other writings and I will focus on addressing the peer reviews. Even though it's not resubmit, I'll ensure that I will listen to the reviewers and I'll address most of their comments, and immediately after formatting it, I will submit it to another journal before I pick another paper. Now, having a backup plans helps you in in adjusting to the rejection. You know, helps you in your, it lessens your distress, because you know, okay, fine, I've got another journal. So why I'm talking about backup plan is you should know that these are the prospective journals where your manuscript can fit into without having to make a lot of changes. I think the most challenging change that you have to do for a manuscript to be going into another journal is to reducing the word limit. Increasing word limit is never a challenge, but reducing word limit is a great challenge, which I'll talk briefly about later in the slides. So please ensure that you have a backup plan and you work keeping those manuscripts in mind, that if it gets rejected here, it can fit into another journal, right? Okay, let's get into, I must remind myself that I've got 1 hour to go, so I need to hurry up a bit. Remember, I was talking about focusing not to get rejected, and getting past the editor, getting past the desk review is our should be our first objective if we do not want to be rejected in another journal or even in the same journal. So desk reviews are important. I always consider them as 50% success. So when do you know you are ready for submission, and how do you ensure that your manuscript will not get rejected? So I've heard this from students, and I've also heard it from colleagues when they look at the paper and they're like, paper in a reputed high impact journal, they would say, oh my God, this paper looks wonderful. I don't think I can ever write like this. I would like to tell everybody that when the paper went in for peer review, it did not look the way you are seeing it right now when it is published. Your objective at the point when you are submitting your manuscript, your objective is not to accomplish that 100% perfect status of the paper that is being published. I have put this into this graphic. You can see the original submission for all authors is 60% as good. It is the peer review, which is 30%, and then additional 10% of the second round is something that is going to make your manuscript 100% perfect for publication. So your task at this stage is to ensure that the brown part, that 60%, you have to make sure that your manuscript passes the desk review. You have to only prepare for the 60%. Do not get terrified or do not get stressed looking at the top, the completely published manuscript. Okay, so what are the things that editors would consider during the desk review. Okay, again, I want to highlight that there is, I mean, it's not coming from any particular published source. It is coming from my experience of being an editor and being a peer reviewer and being an author. That editors are busy bodies. You know, they have limited time. Editors are not going to look into nitty-gritty of your publications. Editors would look, they usually give a bird eye view to your paper. All right, it is the reviewers who are going to get into the details. So I choose to talk about these 4 points, and I want to highlight, please take a note. In this talk, I will not be talking about much on methodology. That's a different, a separate talk perhaps, but methodology is the backbone of your manuscript, definitely. But here we were talking about uh, writing differently for social sciences. So I highlighted the value of getting peer reviews, and one way to get peer review is to submit into Q1 journals and not to get desk rejected. How not to get desk rejected? You have to ensure your these 4 things are in place. Okay, are in place in a broader perspective. I'll go through uh, uh, each of these one by one. Let's look at the title. Okay, title, something that editor looks at. You know, I mean, I work very closely with MJLI, and I work with another journal. So when you know, there are loads of manuscripts, they come in, first thing we do is we look at the title. Is it intriguing? Is it thought provoking? or or is it a title that makes me want, oh, let me see what's inside. Okay, of course, you do not have to get so dramatic, but at least you have to ensure that your titles are interesting. I've just given you 2 examples here, and these are 2020 or 2019 papers. The first title is from Higher Education, National Student Survey Metric, colon, where is the room for improvement? Wow. I mean, I've heard so much about National Student Survey. We've done a lot of studies, we have read a lot of papers about it, but is there something missing? Where's the room for improvement? Let me go and find out what author says. So this kind of title tells you you want to download that, and the editor knows that people will download these kind of papers. So try to get a bit innovative with your titles, of course, to get attention, but please make sure um, do not have a very attractive title, but inside there is not that much of material. So ensure that your title does justice to the work you have done. Another title that I share is an assessment arms race. So you've heard so much about arms race, and how come assessments in higher education become arms race? You would like to go and study. I know what I have read in hard sciences, question marks in titles are a big no-no. But in social sciences, after this talk, you can surf through reputed journals. A lot of question marks and a lot of fancy words and a lot of attractive terms are used because the objective here is to encourage people to read your research. Okay, it is good. It is a good practice to write regional emphasis. Remember, I talked about the journal. If journal highlights geographical locations, okay, this is like there are positives and negatives. I have been asked by certain journals to remove the word Malaysia. They wanted to publish engagement as a global problem, not as a Malaysian problem. Fair enough. If the reviewers and the editor says that, you can do that. But like I'm talking about higher education, we have recently submitted a paper there, and it is a very Malaysian perspective study. The example that I'm giving you right now is the impact and outcomes of non-education doctorates, the case of an emerging Bhutan. We can imagine that there are very less studies coming from Bhutan, and higher education must have grabbed it. And a lot of people are going to download this paper because we don't hear much from Bhutan. So it is a good practice. But again, look at your journal. If your journal is interested in regional representation of some studies, then go ahead inserting your regional location. But if you think the journal is not, you can avoid. Okay, keep your titles short. The literature about the recommendation in literature about titles says you aim for 50 to 100 characters. And because they also say that the shorter titles are cited more than longer titles. So keep less than 13 words. That's could be called a tip. Okay, most important information, avoid jargons. I will talk about a little bit about English language in the end. Being non-native speakers of English, all of us become extremely conscious about our language. And what I have realized in my 6 years of journey, it does not make much difference what language we speak, as long as our research is relevant and it is argued well. So to overcome that anxiousness of not being a native speaker, I've seen a lot of my students and a lot of people, the papers I get to review, they tend to put cryptic, complex names and models just to make it look a very critical study. I would say we should avoid doing that, because not everybody who would get your paper to review might be an expert in that particular model or particular technology that you're going to highlight. So don't do that unless that particular jargon is an important part of your study. Okay. So uh, if you stick to one or two or three pointers here, I'm sure editor is going to be pleased and would move ahead to read your abstract before assigning the reviewers. Okay, before I talk much about abstract, I want to tell you one thing which I forgot is, do you know, I mean, again, working with two journals, I have realized that our reviewers are precious to us, editors. We do not want to burden our reviewers. We do not want to lose our reviewers. This is their academic responsibility. It's a uh, it's a practice, it's a service. Academic service is the right word, and they are indulging in this service on voluntary basis. We are not going to abuse our reviewers practice by blindly throwing our manuscripts to them. Review this. As an editor, I will ensure the manuscript is good enough to be reviewed, because my reviewers are precious to me. I don't want to waste their time. Right. So that's what I was talking about. Reviewer is going to look at the title, and reviewer is going to look at the abstract. Okay. Uh, Whatever paper I have published so far, I always stick to MJLI, Malaysian Journal of Learning and Instruction. You can Google it. It is an open access journal. Uh, it has a beautiful extended format. I always use it, and the extended format talks about purpose, methodology, findings, significance. You can ensure, whether you are a seasoned author, researcher, or a novice researcher, it is an excellent practice to put your abstract in extended form. What was the purpose of your research, or what methodology did you employ, or what were the findings, and what was the significance of your study? And later you can merge it, because of course not every journal accepts extended format. It is a very good technique. It helps, it helps everybody. I mean, my master's project or my PhD students, I always recommend them uh, to use this format. Okay, one important thing as a reviewer I would do is, in the abstract, you must ensure that you are highlighting the gap, the purpose of your research, which is going back to the extended format of MTLI. In the purpose form, I've given you two samples, again coming from high impact journals. These are the lines from abstract. You can Google the lines to find out the full abstract. Look at the way people have highlighted the gap. You have to finish your abstract in most journals in 250 words. So research on how performance-based funding influences the behavior of academic is limited in Europe. That's the gap. There's another example is care has received relatively little attention in higher education. However, literature is blah, blah, blah. So you are telling what is missing and you're telling what is relevant. It is an extremely good practice to impress the editor to let go your manuscript for peer review to highlight the gap and the purpose in your abstract. Okay, when I was very new to writing, and I always wondered how beautifully the abstract are written. But recently I found out that a lot of phrases from the manuscript can go in abstract. It's not plagiarism. So sometimes we write powerful phrases, powerful explanation of certain things in our manuscript. I think it is very okay what I have observed in a lot of prominent authors. You can pick up those phrases and those lines and put in your abstract. Okay. All right. This is something very important. I want to repeat. I will not be talking about methodological details in later slides, but the editor, before he or she decides to send your manuscript for peer review, would look at your methods. And what are the things we see as editors is research design. It's fine. It can be any research design, but who are your participants and how many participants? You know, quantitative studies with 100 and 150 participants have very, very little chances to get through reputed high impact journals in social sciences. If you are doing a qualitative research and you've got 2 participants and 5 participants and in-depth interviews only, it is highly unlikely that you will be successful. And one thing that editors do before assigning your manuscript for peer review, they are going to look into how robust is your design. Will people be able to trust the findings coming out of the system? So your method is something that should be highlighted in your abstract, because as I said, editors are usually busybodies. They've got, let's say, 500 people, uh, uh, 500 manuscripts lying on their table. So they might not go to the method section, but they might look at your abstract to understand what your method would look like. Okay, findings and conclusion. Not many of us have this habit of concluding. Even I don't do that, and I know it is a good practice when you go through the abstract on those reputed journals. Everybody would conclude what they found out. I've just given you 2 examples. It concludes that this kind of architecture can provide a useful guide for growth, and we argue the need. So what was your argument? What was your stance that you took? You can conclude it, and this will make your abstract look wonderful, and you will get through your publication. You will get through your peer review. Sorry. Okay. The next important thing that the editor would look at, and this is something will be easily demonstrated in your title and abstract, but I am going to discuss this briefly separately. The editor is going to look at the currency and the relevance, the relevancy of your topic under investigation. I want to give you a quick example. I'm sure Dr. Hamid is here. We had a matching grant from Indonesia, and we investigated educational researchers. What are their motivations? Why do they do their research? So, okay, the original research was about um, gap between educational theories and practice. That was the original research, but we tried to make the title innovative. Our methodology was robust. We had like too many interviews and content analysis, and the data was really, really rich. The paper came back from at least 4 journals, reputed journals. It is accepted finally in a Scopus Index journal, but you know, the only reason it came back, it was a wonderful paper. You all will be able to read it. Nicely written, nicely argued, very robust methodology. You know, the only reason the paper got rejected, desk rejected from those top journals, was it wasn't current, but it was relevant. But somehow it wasn't current. You know, everybody wrote that, you know, it is a worn out topic, it has been studied a lot, we have a lot of findings, but that doesn't make, you know, your findings does not contribute anything new. So yes, the paper came back from desk. It was not appointed peer reviews. This is the reason, because it lacked currency, and it lacks a little bit of relevance at that point of time. So yes, this is a very big determining factor. Uh, you know, editors know their audiences very well. Who are their audiences? Of course, university professors, lecturers, researchers in education. There are sometimes teachers, practitioners who are their audiences. So editors know that what you are writing will be of interest to who, which community. So once they see, oh no, nobody is going to, my audiences are all from North America. They might not be interested in knowing what's happening in Malaysia. The editor knows, and then editor would refuse, and that's where you will get desk rejection. That is why knowing your journal, scope, the interest of the journal, who are the audiences, is extremely crucial while you decide which journal you would like to publish. Okay, I've talked about it, that the editor is going to have a bird eye view of your method. Method in two ways. We sometimes we do get papers in MJLI where we have 500 students sample. Oh wow, that's wonderful. But when we move down to analysis, it's a descriptive analysis, it's a correlational analysis, or it is regressional analysis. With 500 students, why would somebody do a regression? Why not a more robust statistical analysis for which we can trust the findings more? So yes, that turns us off. Maximum, we can write back to the author saying that, would you mind running a modeling or more robust statistical analysis? So you have to ensure that you uh, mention your analysis in your abstract also, in case editor doesn't go down to the method section, to ensure that your manuscript goes for peer review. It is 11:17. I'm reminded of time. So we will quickly move to, we have, by keeping the points that I was talking about, we have gone past the desk review. Now let's get to the beginning review, at least a positive review. Okay, I do not bring these 4 pillars from anywhere. Again, everything is driven from my own experience, but it would match the literature on publishing. The first pillar is novelty and relevance, which is, yes, my issue is new, it's relevant, it's current, and my methods are unique. Sometimes your issue may not be novel, but you may be proposing novel methods to look at that issue. That adds to the novelty to your study. Okay, the soul of this talk, as I was talking in the beginning, is the resolute argument. Remember, we have been talking about publishing in hard sciences. In hard sciences, there are established laws and principles and framework. They do not need to argue as much as we need to argue. So I think in this part of the talk, I'll be focusing about how do we write argumentatively in persuasive manner so that our social sciences knowledge can be passed off as objective knowledge, as scientific knowledge. Discussion and conclusion becomes a crucial component in deciding whether your manuscript would be rejected during the peer review or would be accepted. And alignment. This is something you will not find anywhere, but this is something I have frequently found while peer reviewing the papers in my context. You know, people fail to align what was their problem, what were their research questions, and what have they found out. We will talk about it soon. Let's begin with novelty and relevance. What comprises novelty in research is an important question. And I had plans to ask, but looks like we are running out of time. So I'll not give you an opportunity to answer, but you know what novelty comprises. Novelty is demonstration of a well-established phenomena in a new system. That's a novelty. You are doing something in a newer way, or testing of a hypothesis with no precedent in the literature, something which has not been done before. Wonderful. That's extremely interesting that you're doing something which has never been done. Everybody would like to know what are your results and what have you found. However, while deciding what is novel in our research, we fail to acknowledge this important question is what comprises relevance in that novelty. You know, things can be novel. Again, I'm not sure if there's a student, Sue, and she always laughs at the example I give that, sometimes I leave my hair down and sometimes I put them in a bun or sometimes I put them in a ponytail. I'm doing novel things. How relevant is that to me? You know, how important that novelty is basically how important the matter at hand, how useful is that? So while we are writing in social sciences, we of course are excited. You know, students would write, this has never been done before. This has never been investigated in this context. We must ensure, along with that novelty, we keep highlighting the relevance of that novelty. And that is what will get to the reviewer's heart. I see a lot of questions coming, and I'll ensure that I take some questions. Yes, please let your questions coming in, and I'm sure somebody will help me to put them together, and then I'll try my best if whatever I can answer. I have put this table, and this table is to explain you the relationship between the novelty and the relevance that you would argue in your paper to be able to get accepted. So look at the three examples. The first example is role of height and school engagement. You know, if my colleagues in this area would look at it, they will be like, wow, that's interesting at first glance. What is the relationship between height and school engagement? This is an extremely novel topic. I'm sure none of us have ever read a paper on it. But if you ask a question, what is its relevance? None. I mean, you can argue it. Again, you can argue everything in social sciences. Knowledge is contestable. But in common sense, there is hardly any relevance of this, because relevance is gauged with what can you do further. You know, the question of so what of your research. For example, I found out there is a strong correlation between height and engagement. So what? Are we going to recommend Ministry of Education to provide supplements to our students so they can gain more height? Is it possible? It is possible. We can all have, supplements, but it is not a practical advice. So things can be novel, but not necessarily they are relevant. Okay. Another thing is what makes your topic relevant is the solution. So I am going to investigate this with a survey research to establish association. I think the reviewers would say, such a complex topic studied through a survey, it can have that causation issues, no novelty and no relevance. So I would pass as topic one as a novel yet extremely useless topic of investigation. Let's come back to topic number two. Students are disengaged at school. Again, my colleague in this field would say, that's the old story. Students have been disengaged at school. What is new about it? But when we look at the relevance of this topic, is highly relevant because of the ramification of not studying engagement. You know, if we don't study engagement, our youth is going to go down drains and going to be ruined. It is so important to address the issues of disengagement. All right, my editor, the one who's reading my paper, gets interested and goes further and reads my solution. What kind of solution is she providing? She will understand their motivation to study. Hello, this has been studied millions of times. People have understood students' motivation. Why should I be publishing another study and adding to the already sleeping literature? We all know the different motivations students have behind engagement. So again, the novelty in my method is there's no novelty, but the relevance, again, yes. If we knew the motivation of students, would be extremely helpful. It would be extremely helpful for teachers and school principals and parents and everybody. So if I have a research falling into number 2, I can add to novelty by improving my method. I can look into motivation, but in an innovative method. Okay, let's go to topic number 3. Movement control orders, access and equity issues in rural Malaysia. I can guarantee that this kind of title can go into, in current times, it can go into any high impact journal as long as your methodology is robust. Novelty is high, relevance is, it is extremely relevant. You're, even though, look at the way I have proposed the solution. How am I going to look at this problem? Through solution. What is my solution? I'll just explore the ways to enhance access and equity. It is not an innovative solution, but it is highly relevant. We want to know the ways to enhance access and equity. So you need to, actually this is something comes at the conceptualization stage. You need to put your problem, you need to see how are you going to address that problem, what will be, that is what your discussion part is. And I'm running out of time, so I'll hurry up a bit. Coming back to the most important topic, which is writing argumentatively. How do we write argumentatively? There is no one answer to this. I did a lot of research to come up with this slide. I'm sure everybody is going to get this slide and it is going to be helpful. I am still taking the same example. While you write the first section of your manuscript, make sure you work around these 4 topics. It will make your topics interesting. Somebody just asked, and I could see the pop-up question, how to increase the relevance. Here, you are going to argue here. This is, look at the point number 2. Relevance, you have to tell people, okay, what is the topic, students in disengagement? Why is the topic important? This is the one you are going to tell people, this topic is so important. You know, you have to highlight the ramifications of your topic. You have to tell people that if engagement is not studied, the world is going to come down. You know, what will happen? Create urgency. You know, highlight that this topic requires swift action. Right. So this slide is the gist of my talk today. This is where most of us in social sciences fail to get into high impact journals. Because we fail to take stands, we fail to highlight the urgency, the importance, the relevance of our topic. So if you're asking how to make it relevant, we can make it relevant by of course having innovative methodologies, by having innovative topics. But you can have a wonderful manuscript with a innovative methodology and with a hot burning issue. If you have not argued it well, remember in the beginning I said the word teased out. If you have not teased out the relevance of your topic, you would fail to convince the reviewers to give a green signal, an acceptance to your manuscript. So while that skill of writing argumentatively is a skill that you will learn throughout the journey of publication. But I think these 4 guiding questions are extremely helpful for novice researcher to sit down and see, argue at least 1 or 2 paragraphs, argue that why is your topic important. Okay, then just scaring the reviewers that this topic is of high importance. Give your stance. What is your claim? What are you going to do for it? That is what is sometimes your philosophical stance. Okay, sometimes that is what methodology you are going to use to solve that problem. What is your stance? What is your claim? And this is where you come and you struggle with multiple perspective in social sciences, but you have to fight that your perspective in this context is the best perspective. Does your paper needs to be published? So what is your stance? What is your claim? Sometimes I sit on my claim for like 7 days and 8 days. What am I proposing in my argument? You know, I repeat again, this slide is the gist, is the soul of this talk. If people have learned to argue, put forward their claims, their argument, there are 80% chances people will tell you make changes here and there in your methodology, here and there in your discussion. But if this section is done right, you have touched the heart of your reviewers, of the journals where reviewers take time. They sit on your manuscript for at least 2 to 3 hours. Okay, once you have taken your stance, what is the rationale for your stance? Why did you take that stance? Like, for example, in this example, I'm talking about social media. You know, there are millions of factors that can affect students' engagement, but I choose to stand up for social media. It is my responsibility to tease out my argument in favor of social media, that social media is detrimental, and I need to produce evidences. This is what is literature review is. You know, students just go and write that social media is this, social media is this, such a no, I don't. I know, I'm a reviewer, I'm an expert, I know what social media is, and I know the antecedents and the outcomes of social use of social media. I want you to argue in your context how social media is responsible for students' engagement. Okay, this is something which takes a lot of time to write. This slide is something authors in social sciences take for granted. Okay, this is your this is the determining factor whether your manuscript will be accepted or rejected, right? uh, Quickly continuing the word on the discussion on resolute argument is these are few points coming from literature, that when you want to build an argument, make sure your argument is clear, and it has a clear direction, it has a purpose. Do not go too broad. Like, if you're arguing about engagement, focus only on engagement. Do not talk about well-being, or do not talk about life satisfaction, too many things, because you need to focus um, on a handful of variables, and you do not want reviewers to get distracted with multiple or a very broader perspective. While you're building your argument, it should always be a debatable topic. Do not mention regular facts and expect somebody to feel thrilled about reading your argument. So it has to be debatable. Debatable in social sciences means there has to be multiple answers to that the issue that you're raising. That is what makes it debatable. And your job is to pick a side. That was in the last slide, take a stance. You have to take a stand that, okay, this topic is like this. I understand it can be explained from this perspective and that perspective, but this is what my side is. And what you do, you make claims to support your stance. I am going to make a claim. It is the social media which is the most crucial factor in student disengagement. And the claims that you are making will be supported in the later part of your paper. This is how you write the first section of your manuscript, and that is a most important decisive factor in passing the peer review for your manuscript. This is, I'm concluding the first part. You normally from quality journals, you often get this kind of phrase saying that article, the manuscript is not critical. What do we mean by critical? This is what is critical, because you were just being very descriptive. You were just putting definitions. You were not arguing. You were not using those facts and claims by taking your sides. So begin by arguing your thesis statement in the introduction section. What is your stance? There is a problem. You have described it. You have talked about the ramification of not addressing that problem. But what is your stance? What are you standing for? What are the claims? Why are you taking that stance? Is something needs to be argued. While you build that argument, this is where point number 2, your literature review comes in. Because when you want to convince people about something, this is what you say: hey, the literature says this, the literature says this. And automatically your work becomes critical, because you are not being descriptive in your literature review. You are using the pointers from literature review to help you build your argument. This is why you would notice in most of those journals, there is hardly a standalone section on literature review, because people don't have place to write literature review, because they were so busy arguing their point at this stage that there is not much need to have a standalone section on literature review. So but sometimes in psychology, because it's a little bit of technical and scientific field, we prefer to have a brief literature review. But in most social sciences journal, people would like to embed the literature review while building their argument. And of course, once you have built your argument, you would also see most journals, the first two pages, in the first 2 pages, you will get to read the research objectives and the research questions. So this is the first part of your manuscript. Okay. Yes, because I would like to answer some questions. I'll hurry up a bit and let's give 10 or 15 minutes to the questions. How do we draw conclusion and discuss it? But how? Okay, coming back to conclusion, I just want to ensure one thing is, so far, I have never been rejected for having a poor discussion session. So that's the good news. The idea is, if you have built a good argument and you have a robust methodology, the reviewers always help you enrich your discussion and conclusion by asking relevant questions. But of course, you do not want to write a discussion and conclusion which is very shallow and puts off the reviewer in the end, and the reviewer gives its judgment. No, the manuscript should not be accepted. So how do we write a good discussion and conclusion? Is order from most important findings to the least important finding is a trend that I have observed, and also the literature says. Okay, it is very common that we like to hide insignificant findings, or we like to find insignificant findings or negative findings or unexpected results. I think the fact that social sciences is not governed by established laws, human behaviors are unpredictable. It is very okay for us to report the results; those are unexpected. Give a good discussion, a good reason for those results, and it will make your research authentic. It will make your research look authentic. You know, everything is good in my studies can make people question about the authenticity. Okay. Mostly people would just go about, my study found out there's a strong correlation, or the interviews reported this happened. I think the reviewers are not interested in reading your results again. They have looked at your results already in the results section. What you have to do in discussion is, what does that mean in your context, especially in your context, and what does it mean in a bigger context? For example, there was a correlation between use of social media and social disengagement. I don't want to see the R value here. I want to see, how do you interpret? What's your interpretation of these findings in your context and in the broader context? So, for example, students who are more children who spend more time on social media are more likely to be disengaged at school. These are our findings, and we think because social media consumes most of their time, most of their energy, they sleep late. So in conclusion, they are looking at those kind of explanation. How has your finding advanced knowledge? This is something even I failed to do, and this is what peer reviews highlight. So what? Oh, you've done that research. You found out that social media affects students' engagement. So what do I do with that? You need to give at least one good persuasive paragraph on how your findings have contributed in advancing the knowledge uh, related to the field of inquiry. And of course, application of findings, everybody does that, but we do it in very abstract manner. Findings have implication for ministry, have implication for policy. You can do that, sounds good. Don't be over ambitious. Everybody says that. It can backfire sometimes. But what is most interesting to reviewers, especially in the field of education, is you give findings that are that have practical implications, because everybody is looking for something hands-on. What can I do? So most reviewers from those journals will send back your discussion section and seek findings that are practical, that are hands-on, that are doable. So focus on that, and that's a wonderful practice. That makes you think, what's the value of your research? I've done so much of work in the field, and how does my research help? All right, so this should help you. I have to hurry a bit. A limitation and suggestions, everybody does that. Be generous. This is a tricky part. You can play around. You know that sometimes something is missing in your research. Just acknowledge that as limitation and tell that you're recommending it for future studies, and that will make a good discussion and conclusion section. People might have questions whether you should have two separate sections for discussion and conclusion, and I highly recommend, unless you're running out of words and space, I highly recommend to have two separate sections of discussions and conclusions. Conclusion would normally uh, conclude the research and talk about application and suggestions, recommendations for future research. So it is good practice to have separate sections. All right, quickly, the I think I'm almost finishing. This is something is going to be extremely helpful to all my PhD students and to all the novice authors. This is something which I have experienced in my context. This is called alignment. I give this table to all my research method class, and I'm giving you all here. You might be wondering what is 60%, 10%, and 30%. 60% is something which I've spoken about in all this talk, is building an argument, writing argumentatively, persuade the reviewers to get your point, take your stance, argue your point. You know what is 60%? While I'm writing my manuscript, I spend 60% of my time writing the first part of the manuscript. Now, you might wonder that methodology, and I'm repeating again, a robust methodology is the backbone of a successful publication. But methodology is 100% effort while I'm conducting the research. Okay? Methodology while reporting should not take the time. It should take the time. All your energy should go on the field while you're collecting your data, while you're conducting the research. But for the paper, methodology should take 10% of your time while you're reporting it. In psychology, we are extremely fortunate. It is very prescriptive, very technical, but yes, for qualitative research, writing methodology can be challenging. That's why I said it is a separate section of discussion which can't be covered here. Okay, most important thing is column number 1 and column number 3, which I spend 30% of my time writing in a manuscript. So what you have to do is, this should be done actually in the beginning when you have your draft ready. You look at the problem statement. What is the problem that you've been talking about? And remember the thesis statement, your stance. What is your claim? What are you standing for? What stance are you taking? Please make sure within column 1 there is an alignment. You are taking a stance for your problem. There are sometimes people talk about problem intently, but the stance they are taking has nothing to do with the problem they are talking about. Please ensure there is a balance between point number 1 and point number 2 in column 1. Your research question should relate to your thesis statement. If you have taken a stance that it is social media that's affecting students' engagement, and my research question should relate to social media and student engagement. All right. Now, column 1 talks about the problem and the stance you are taking. Column 1 will specify your research philosophy, your research, that's something is called epistemology or ontology of your research, your stance of your lens that you have adopted to look at the problem. And that lens will determine your methodology. You said you want to explore something, and suddenly your methodology is quantitative. There is a mismatch. Do not argue from a quantitative perspective, from objective lens, if your methodology is qualitative. So please ensure that your argument, you are becoming a person actually, while through your argument you are a person in person talking to the peer reviewer. So ensure that you wear the same hat while you argue and while you propose your methodologies. Your methodology should match with your problem statement, your thesis statement, your research philosophy. Okay. Now, while we write this part 1 and part 2, it looks like it has been ages. We have been working on the manuscript. And when we reach to the last stage, we just want to get it finished and publish and get over it. It's a long journey. While you're working on the third part, you almost forget what was the stance that you have taken. So I recommend people, you have your findings, you have written your findings, but before you write your discussions and your conclusion, keep going back to your problem. Keep asking yourself, is your conclusion relevant to the problem that you had mentioned at the beginning? Is your conclusion, remember the claim, remember I talk about when you will take a stance, you will make certain claims. Are your findings substantiating the claims that you had made in the first section? This is a practice not many people do, and I'm telling you, it is an important practice. Put down your manuscript and see what you had said in the first section. How are your findings helping you substantiate what you had said? You had said that student engagement would lead to delinquency. Are you talking about delinquency issues and implications? That if, now we know it's the social media, we need to control the number of screen time our students have. Are the implications related to the problems that you have discussed? I'm not sure how convincingly I have articulated this slide, but just like the argumentation slide, this is another critical slide which is going to help you align your manuscript. The idea here is to have a meaningful manuscript. Idea here is to have a manuscript that began with a problem, that had a crisis, that had a climax, then that has a solution, and you have reached the last stage. If you will just Google how to write a story, it has stages. Your manuscript should look meaningful, should be cohesive, should make meaning from the beginning to the end. Quickly going about the language skill, I saw some of the questions popping up about language skills. I like this quote that if I had more time, I would have written you a shorter letter. It tells you how difficult it is for us to write concisely yet persuasively. We always think if we are going to repeat one thing again and again, it is going to convince a person. I'm sorry, that's not the case in academic writing. We need to write shorter yet impactful. Okay, this is the last slide, and I want to very much address this issue. Everybody has it. We are non-native speakers of English language, and no matter what we have studied and what we speak, We are always anxious writing because most of those journals are situated in North America or in English speaking countries. So we do get anxious while writing. One thing that I can ensure every one of you is these journals do not require us to write with that kind of um, eloquence or expertise in English language. All they require is correct English. So if you are convinced that you're writing correct sentences, but your argument style is persuasive, is more than enough. Second point is writing tight, clear, and concise. Remember the first slide I showed you just before this is I would have written a shorter letter. It is a very challenging task for anybody, no matter you are a native speaker or not, to be able to write clear, concise, and tight. This is what academic writing is all about. This is what those expert peer reviews are looking at. And this is what we will all learn by practicing experiential journey, not by listening to any workshop. You have to practice to write tight and clear. I always tell my students who are not native speakers of English that it is not the language, but it is the quality of your thoughts and the arguments you have made. The argument that I have been talking about in the last slides, how do you argue persuasively and argumentatively? You need to make sure you are not redundant. Reduce, refine, and remove. I guess Twitter is a wonderful platform for all of us. We know we've got limited number of words and we want to express our opinion. How many, before we tweet, how do we organize our thoughts? So just like Twitter, make sure every line you're writing for your publication is a tweet. Thank you very much. I am just in time. I will finish it off and I will stop sharing so I can see the comments. And there are a lot of comments. I don't know if RMC would like to intervene at this moment. How do I take questions? If people will turn on their microphones. But yes, I'm done from my side. Thank you for listening. Let your questions come in. Hello. I hope people are
Hello, Doctor.
Yes.
Yes,
Hello.
Doctor. I have listed all the questions in the WhatsApp and also on the chat box too.
Okay, that's okay, that's great. Thank you very much. You're doing a wonderful job. Okay,
Most welcome.
I will try and quickly say, does 5% and 20% acceptance rates apply to Malaysian high impact journal too? Okay, what I know of is in Malaysia, in teaching and learning, I think MJLI is the one, and I am not so sure. I don't know if Prof. Rosna would like to tell what's the acceptance rate, but yes, we do have extremely high rejection rate even with MJLI. But I am not so sure about other journals in Malaysia. But yes, we do have, we are pretty stringent about acceptance rate in MJLI. I'll go to question number 2. What are different challenges when writing and publishing to local and foreign journals? I would say writing for local journals is comparatively easier as compared to writing for foreign journals. Writing for foreign journal constitutes a strong, persuasive argument. Okay, that is what I mean. I'm not saying local journals do not look for those arguments, but I would say local journals are very familiar with our context and they are familiar with the needs. So apparently, it's just like, we are so close to each other, we know each other. There's less convincing required to be published in local journals. Question 3 is, whenever we review paper, compare with our own, we don't find much difference. I wonder why they all got accepted, why mine is rejected. Whoever has written this question is a wonderful question. Remember, I showed you a slide that when you see a published paper, you always think this is what a paper must have went in. But please understand, papers do not go as good as they look after they are published. Okay, but here you are saying, I don't understand why my paper is rejected. Maybe it is very context specific. Maybe your issue was not as relevant or as novel as your friends or whoever's journal you have taken. Uh, Even I ask myself sometimes these questions, like, oh, my paper was as good as this. If there was a paper published on this, so perhaps the paper was coming from Indonesia. The editor was more inclined towards knowing Indonesia because less papers coming, and my paper went in from Malaysia, and perhaps there are already many papers from Malaysia, so the editors feels that it won't do any good. So yes, that could be a reason. Question number 4, please advise me how to make a good title. Okay, you can go to the slide. I've given you some tips which you can use to create a good title. Okay, question number 5, how to research the appropriate reviewer and how to get fast published journal. Okay, a very most important information is quality journals would take long time because the reviewers there work a lot on your manuscript. They sit on your manuscript for at least 3 hours or 4 hours. So please do not accept a quick answer if you are talking about quality reputed journal. Question 6, what is your suggestion for the respondent for quality journal? Quality journal, if it is a quantitative study and if I am at the EIC, I would not see a study with less than 300 samples in positive light. And if it is a qualitative study, I don't mind having 5 respondents as long as it is in-depth interviews and multiple sources of data and rich data. So yes, that is my answer. Okay, number 7. I've still got some time, so I'll continue answering. The screen has popped up and I've lost my WhatsApp. Okay, quickly there. Do we need to find examples? Okay, where can I find the impact factor list for all journal? Please Google. There are, I think, Elsevier sites and WOS sites. There are so many sites. In fact, Scopus itself gives you the indexing and the impact factor. Question number 10, do we need our findings, for example, result of SPSS in abstract? No, you don't have to put your SPSS finding, but you have to synthesize your results, that the results are in support or in, against. So no, you don't have to put your SPSS findings, but you have to synthesize, articulate in a textual form. How many issues do we have to add to abstract? 1 or 2 issues that are most prominent that you think stand alone and make your research relevant are enough to be answered in your abstract. Okay, question number 12. How to respond sensitive comments from reviewer that relate to religion? The reviewer authorizes is known ideology, opinion. What part will? That's a wonderful question. Yes, there are times when, see, I forgot to talk about, I've been praising peer review, but if you will read some literature on peer review, it is sometimes criticized. And as somebody has written here, that some people might have offensive comments, which are not same like our ideology or some religious comments. This is not necessary to address all the issues that the reviewers have raised. You should know your research well. You should know whether you would like to address those issues or not. So there's always a column. That's why, I mean, perhaps again another workshop. How do you respond to reviewers? There are 3 columns. Write your rebuttal. Say what you have done and say what you have not done, and give a good justification. Why have you not done? Because we are social scientists, it's a wonderful thing. You have your own perspective, be it from your religion or your context or your culture. You can always argue it, and I'm sure the reviewers from those journals are open enough, broad-minded enough to accept your argument. Somebody has written how to increase relevance. Remember, I talked about argue persuasively. Your topic might be relevant, but if you do not argue, the reviewers will not be able to see the relevance of your research. Okay, number 14, how to decide whether the article is suitable for Scopus Index. Okay, remember, I gave you one slide where I said, do not gauge your article with a published article, because it must have gone 60% as good. So if you think your article is somewhere not so close to the published article, but yes, somewhere near, yeah, you can go ahead and try. Question number 15, research questions, RQ need to demonstrate in section. No, please, that is why this talk, why did I bring the context of social sciences is, do not be prescriptive. A, B, C, D, it does not work. Articulate your research problem, articulate your research questions. That is why standalone literature review does not attract reviewers. Everything is your articulation. So
Hello?
do not have research question. Yes.
Ma'am, I beg your pardon. That's what I wanted to know. Okay, in that case, we can come up only with the objectives. So we can really know from the objective that what was our question is looking for. Can we
Yes.
Demonstrate somewhere in the abstract that our objective was these things? So
Exactly.
please from that, what was my questions actually? Is that enough? Good enough to demonstrate everything?
Remember, I talked about extended abstract. I would encourage you to look at MPLI. That's the one I know, and that's the one I use. Go, and the first subheading of extended abstract is purpose. And purpose is where you have to highlight the gap. And the purpose of this research is to address, or is to explore, or is to, that is, you are articulating your research objective or research question. Get my point? So.
Yeah, thank you, ma'am.
Yeah, so you can have a look at the extended abstract, and it helps you a lot. Please feel free to unmute and ask, because I'm on in my WhatsApp, I can't see. Okay, and then what are the most common feedback from reviewers? Language, grammar, irrelevance, issues of alignment, etc. Yes, yes. See, most common feedback, when I said that I'm assuming that your research has a very good issue, and it has a robust methodology. The most common feedback that I have gotten from reviewer is, you do not tease out the issue. You do not argue. You do not convince us that it needs to be studied or why it needs to be studied. So the slide that I was saying is the soul, is the slide for success in social sciences. Okay, so I'm done with the questions here, and anybody's question not answered, feel free to. Any other questions?
Ma'am, ma'am, we used to have a look that there is a section after a method result. There is a section that we come up every articles. There have sessions that discussion.
Right.
What they really focus on that. Many like Q1 journals, they just they don't come up with these things. But if I go for like Q3, Q4, like some ISSS, I mean normal journals, not reputed, they have a section like a discussion. And this is not really, I don't understand, ma'am, what really we should write on there?
Discussion is, you will get the slides, and if you would see the slide, discussion is what are your findings and what is the meaning of your finding. So, of course, in some poor papers in discussion, you say students or authors are going to write, the findings are, we found out this, we found out that, we found out that. No, I don't want to read your findings. I've already seen your findings in your analysis section. Tell me, what is the meaning of your findings? Okay, explain that. I give you an example. The use of social media significantly predicts student engagement. That is your finding. I don't want to see the regression number. I want to see, what do you interpret with this? What is the meaning that social media is associated with disengagement? So please explain it more. And explain what does it mean in your context, and what does it mean in broader context. Broader context mean in the sense of social media. What implication does it have for student engagement? What implication does it have for social media? That is discussion. So make sure you are not talking about again repeating the relationship and the regression, the results, SPSS results. You talk about what meanings are you making.
Ma'am, just two more queries. Just it is
Sure,
very
sure.
quick about the references. I have seen like I have published Q2 papers. Even when I looked at Q1, Q2 papers in various reputed journals, they have go references like 80 above, 90 above. So does really have any impact about this referencing? And it's really necessary to have many references.
Yes. Yeah, Mahdi, it's a good question. It's a very good question. Good. I mean, I think I should have included this in the talk. Sometimes reviewers would look at the quality of journals you have consulted. They would look at. What kind of. My voice is echoing.
My voice is echoing.
What kind of literature? Consulting with. So, what kind of literature you are
open his mic.
So viewers, so coming back, I'm so because my voice was echoing.
You say, ma'am. Someone else open. Open it.
Yeah, I don't know something.
Yeah, I don't know something is happening.
I think Dr. Siti. She opened her mics. And
please see, you are running out of words.
Speak.
Somebody.
Let me wait and see. Yes, looks like it's muted now. Yeah. Okay, so Mahadi, yes, the kind of references will also influence peer reviewers, but having too many references, I'm not sure if it works in positive way or in negative way, but I think you should keep references that are important. In my case, personally, sometimes I want more place to write my manuscript rather than filling up the words with references. So I will choose references very carefully, and I will recommend everybody to have quality references, but not to have too many references. If you have made a claim, it is okay to give 2 or 3 references. For one claim, there's no need to give 8 references unless you are highlighting a point that this topic is widely studied in different countries, and you'll name each country and give the reference, name each country. So yeah, it is very much on your discretion. But yes, having too many references just takes up unnecessary place. I would rather use that place to write my argument. All right.
Doctor.
Yep.
How to write an impactful literature review?
To write an impactful literature review. I've been talking all this while that avoid getting into the practice of having a standalone literature review. Literature review you have to write literature review for your thesis, but literature review for a paper, you don't have to review the literature. Experts know it. But when you take your stance, like my stance is students are ruined because of social media. This is my stance. Now, I have to bring all the literature available in this world on social media to argue my point. Look, this research says this. Look, this research was conducted in Australia. It said this. That is what I'm doing literature review, and that is what is the critical literature review. I do not have to say, this is the definition of social media. Social media has been studied in Australia, and these were the findings. Social media has been studied in Pakistan. These were the findings. That is description. I don't have to give that description. I have to tell the reviewer my stance is it is social media that is affecting engagement. Why do I remember? Go to my slide. Why do you take that stance? That is where his literature review comes in. You bring in the evidence to tell people, look, this is what has been done.
Ma'am, I beg your pardon. It's very complex. For me, I don't know what is really necessary. When we refer, like cite in my statement, like I come up with a statement that social media is very influencing for smart education. Okay. Some people put referencing with their page number that I followed that page, I read that page. Does it contains any different value, or does it look very more transparent, or what is the essence
Okay.
to page number and these things?
You have to use, these are called quotations, direct quotations. You use direct quotations when you are building your argument. For example, I want to write, social media is seen as the central cause of student disengagement. And it is not me. I think the same way, but it is not me who has written the word central cause of. So what I'll do, I'll put this into quotations and I'll put page number 15 and the top researcher. So I am using somebody's quotation to articulate my point. So you got my point. Like, this is your argument, but you are building the argument by taking the phrase from a big person, and that makes your argument even more relevant. Wow, this researcher is standing up. This researcher's stance is against social media, and look at the phrase he is bringing is from the guru of psychology.
Yeah,
So
got it, ma'am.
you got your point. So you
Yeah, thank you, ma'am.
take those quotes to put your thoughts forward.
Doctor, it is commonly believed that if you are a novice researcher, then you need to be very careful in sending your manuscript to a high impact journal, especially as a single author. How much is it true?
Okay, because there was some disturbance. You said as a novice researcher, it is not advisable
To send your manuscript to high impact journal as a single author.
No, I don't think so. I'm sure it doesn't make any difference. Most high impact journals undertake blind review, whereby they do not know if there is a one author or multiple authors. See, these are all lame explanations, perhaps, to not to work hard. Yes, Dr. Fiza is also writing. Nobody knows you are a single author or multiple authors. It is the quality of your research.
No, I mean the editor. The editor check your name.
Nobody knows. Nobody knows.
No, editors might know, yes, but it doesn't make any difference. A single person can undertake a impactful research. A single person can write. There's no evidence that a single person can't publish in a novice person.
Ma'am, I beg your pardon. Actually, that any manuscript, just consider one person who wrote most. It doesn't actually. Many people, I never seen that many people write one manuscript. Actually, many people can be a part, like some part, but most of the part done by one person. This is the real story of a manuscript. So far, maybe Madam will tell me.
Yeah. Sometimes it happens. Okay, Ali is writing. How many references per idle for paper? Ali, we had discussed this question before. I think Mahadi had asked. There is no number, specific limit. How many are needed by you? You put them. If they are not needed, there's no need. There's nothing. This does not determine success or failure of your publication. However, the quality of references does make a difference. Are you referring to predatory journals or non-index journal? That will change the opinion of peer reviewers.
Hello, ma'am.
Yes.
Please, I have a question. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can.
All right, sorry. I have a problem with most of Q1 journals these days. You carry out a study in Malaysia, rigorous analysis, good findings. And then because of the fact that the study is Malaysian specific, they give excuse, they give that excuse that they reject it. Most of Q1 reputable journals do this these days. And then they're asking you to go international, look for, similar studies, kind of make it international. And it bothers me a lot because you want to you want to make your study to be, within a particular space, and you have done that quite very well in your PhD, and you are kind of reporting it, sending it to journal, and they said no. For our journal, I've got a rejection like 2-3 journals in this giving the same excuse that this study is Malaysian study and it's not accepted,
Yeah.
kind of. So I get worried because of that. Even though the study is well reported, is rigorous.
See, this is why I was focusing on scope of the journal. Okay, you have to understand, maybe the journal, I'm not sure which journal you have submitted. Maybe the journal where you have submitted, the journal is situated in North America. Why would people in North America would like to read what's happening in Malaysia? We can't force people to be open-minded and say, hey, please read also about my problems. I have experienced this. The editor, it is a Q1 journal, WOS Q1. The editor was kind enough to ask me to remove all references to Malaysia. The paper was about student engagement. The editor explicitly told me to highlight school engagement as a global issue because he would like people all over the world get solutions against student disengagement. So you have to choose your journal. If your journal is not interested in addressing regional problems, don't go to those journals. That's number one. Number two, what kind of insight, how are your insights but relevant to Malaysian? What is new in your insight? How are they different because they are coming from Malaysian context? So perhaps the reviewer did not see that you are contributing an extra knowledge just because it's coming from Malaysia. So instead of generalizing that journals are not taking your study, I would say I did not use the word introspection. Introspection is a very strong word. When you get back, when your manuscript is rejected, even though the editor has written 2 lines, sit down and introspect and see what is missing. And trust me, if you are saying it is a good manuscript, it will find its home. But it may not find its home where you are looking for because it is not relevant in that context. This is the reason when you are going to write, it is very good to look at the journals and the scope and see, okay, this is how I'm going to tweak my study. I'm not going to write only for Malaysian audiences. I'm going to write it for international audiences so it can be published.
Yeah, I eventually published it in Q1. Thank you so much.
Okay, you're welcome. You don't give up. That's a wonderful, wonderful objective of your life. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hello, Prof. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Yeah, this is Amit from Australia.
Yes,
In corroborating with what you just said, I have the same problem with my research that they actually said that when you are focusing on a certain country, you have to generalize it by saying developing country like Malaysia. And the researcher has to highlight in the A-star journals that we are aware of the similarity problem sampling bias that we take into consideration of other developing countries by taking the fixed effects. So we can make a kind of a statement, try to identify that very fact. So thank you for the your contribution. I want to ask a question regarding your conclusion side. I just want to contribute to that.
Thank you very much. I'm glad that it is helpful. And I want to say to all the students and early career researchers, what I had said in my slide, there is no other way than undergoing the process, experiencing the process to learn to write for these journals. You have to write, you have to submit, you have to get rejected, you have to get the feedback and learn, built upon it. Okay?
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Regarding your conclusion side, when we are making a claim that we have actually contributed to a certain study, do we still need to put a kind of a reference in that very contribution? And what do you mean by in your conclusion side by saying that what kind of knowledge are you advancing? Are you suggesting that we should put our contribution in the
Yeah.
conclusion aspect as
Yeah,
well.
you because you are in the beginning, remember, while you are building your argument, you are taking a stance that there is something missing, and then you are going, there is something wrong, there is a problem, and you're going to address this problem by taking a stance, by taking taking sides. Now, once you have your findings, you have to talk about how has your finding improved that field, or improve that, even the problem, how has the problem been solved with your findings? That is what everybody would like to know. Why did you spend so many years investigating a problem when it does nothing? Get my point? So
Yeah,
if
yeah.
I diet and I exercised for 2 hours a day, what happened in the end? Wow, it has contributed to my health. I have lost weight, I'm healthier, for example. So you must ensure that whatever you have done, your findings should contribute to the solution of the problem. But that's a narrow view. You also have to look into the broader view, how your research has helped in a bigger sense in advancing any knowledge in your field. What is the new thing that we know from your research? Okay. All right. So I hope we are done. And thank you very much, everybody, once again for joining. And I wish everybody all the best in succeeding in this journey. And keep writing, don't give up, keep your aspirations high, and one day all of us can learn how to write. All right.